Freud's model of psychosexual development describes a series of stages: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital, each centered on erogenous zones and associated conflicts. Fixations occur when an individual fails to resolve the key challenges of a stage, leaving psychic energy tied up in that developmental period. These unresolved fixations often manifest as patterns in adult behavior, including procrastination and self-sabotage. By examining how stage-specific fixations prime particular procrastination traps, individuals can recognize the unconscious roots of their delay tactics. In the oral stage, from birth to roughly 18 months, gratification revolves around feeding and oral stimulation. An oral fixation might emerge if weaning happens too early or too late, leaving the adult with unresolved dependency needs. This adult may seek comfort in behaviors that delay engagement with tasks: endless coffee breaks, compulsive snacking, social media scrolling, essentially oral habits substituted for the unmet developmental need. Procrastination here serves as an oral gratification substitute. Biting nails, stress eating, or mindless browsing soothe unconscious anxiety about autonomy and competence. The anal stage, from about 18 months to 3 years, focuses on bowel and bladder control. Conflict between the child's urge for autonomy and parental demands for control can produce anal retentive or expulsive character traits. An anal retentive fixation tied to overly strict toilet training yields a perfectionistic, rigid adult who procrastinates by refining insignificant details endlessly. The fear of messy mistakes or insufficient order drives them to delay completion, believing any product less than flawless is unacceptable. On the other hand, an anal expulsive fixation stemming from overly lenient training produces messiness and impulsivity. Such an individual may procrastinate through chaotic avoidance, leaving project materials scattered, jumping from task to task so that true work never solidifies. Both perfectionism and impulsivity are procrastination traps rooted in anal stage conflicts. During the phallic stage, approximately ages 3 to 6, the Oedipus complex and emerging sexual identity dominate. Unresolved phallic conflicts can yield feelings of inadequacy or excessive bravado. An individual fixated unhealthily may respond to challenging tasks by either overestimating their ability, leading to grandiose planning and blind procrastination when reality checks arrive, or by feeling inferior and avoiding tasks that might expose perceived incompetence. The unconscious fear of castration, symbolic for loss of potency, translates into deliberate delay of projects that threaten self-esteem. The procrastination emerges as a defense against the anxiety of proving oneself vulnerable. Freud's latency stage, from about 6 years to puberty, emphasizes social skill development and sublimation of earlier sexual impulses. While Freud considered latency a period of relatively static psychosexual energy, modern readers recognize that unresolved earlier fixations can resurface here, intensifying procrastination patterns. A latency period fixation might involve an over-reliance on peer approval or a retreat into academic or hobby obsessions to evade emotional challenges. Procrastination in this context appears as ritualistic immersion in safe, socially sanctioned activities, scorekeeping in games, excessive homework refinement, sidestepping tasks that threaten social acceptance or self-worth. The final genital stage, beginning at puberty, represents mature psychosexual development and the capacity for healthy love and work. Fixations in earlier stages impede full engagement in this stage. Thus, adult procrastination often signals failure to integrate psychosexual energies into constructive genital stage pursuits. An adult who cannot bring earlier anal retentive rigidity or oral dependency into balance struggles to commit to projects requiring both creativity and discipline. Procrastination here is not merely poor time management, but evidence that psychic energy has not been reallocated from earlier fixations to adult responsibilities. Understanding how each psychosexual fixation shapes procrastination styles illuminates paths for intervention. The oral procrastinator benefits from substituting healthier oral behaviors, chewing gum or drinking water, paired with time-structured work intervals that satisfy dependency needs, without derailing progress. The anal retentive over-refiner learns to set firm deadlines and adopt good-enough criteria to override perfectionism, while the anal expulsive avoider thrives with structured, detailed plans and accountability partners to counter impulsive sidetracking. Phallic fixation remedies involve cultivating realistic self-appraisal and gradual exposure to challenging tasks, allowing for vulnerability without overwhelming anxiety. Latency-rooted procrastinators may combine social support groups with goal-oriented checklists that validate peer approval for meeting milestones rather than for avoidance rituals. Genital stage integration hinges on exercises that align work tasks with personal values and healthy relationship skills, transforming procrastination into purposeful action rooted in mature psychosexual energy. By mapping procrastination behaviors onto psychosexual stage fixations, individuals uncover the unconscious energy patterns driving delay. Recognizing the specific stage conflicts offers targeted strategies to reallocate psychic energy away from self-sabotage and toward productive adult tasks. In doing so, the once invisible roots of procrastination become clear, empowering the individual to break free from outdated developmental patterns and embrace healthy achievement. Freud's latency stage, extending from around 6 years of age to the onset of puberty, brings a relative quiet of psychosexual conflict, but intensifies the maturation of social and intellectual capacities. In this phase, earlier instincts become sublimated into socially acceptable activities like learning, sports, and friendships, creating a measured rhythm to development. However, unresolved fixations in earlier stages can resurface during latency as procrastination, especially when academic or social tasks echo those infantile conflicts. For instance, a child with an oral fixation may channel unresolved dependency into excessive classroom participation, talking to avoid writing assignments, or cling to routine revision, postponing creative projects. At work, the adult mouth-centered procrastinator might default to checking messages or chatting with colleagues to defer report writing. Latency's hallmark is the mind's capacity to tolerate delay. Intellectual pursuits become a socially endorsed form of avoidance, where endless research supplants decisive action. In the genital stage, beginning with puberty and extending into mature adulthood, psychosexual energy refocuses on healthy partnerships and productive work. Freud saw this stage as the culmination of psychosexual integration, where the individual can invest libido in love relationships and career endeavors. Yet if earlier stage conflicts remain unresolved, genital stage activity mirrors them in subtler forms of procrastination and self-sabotage. Consider the adult tasked with leading a major project. The genital stage ideally equips them to balance creativity, collaboration, and productivity. But if an anal retentive perfectionism persists, the individual may endlessly refine minor project details, overstructuring agendas, over-editing documents, delaying deliverables under the guise of excellence. Alternatively, someone with a phallic fixation might avoid initiating the project altogether, fearing exposure of competence and potential castration, metaphorically as criticism or failure. Thus, what appears as professional procrastination often masks deeper developmental conflicts. Latency consolidation can likewise go awry. The capacity for peer collaboration, first honed in school, transforms into workplace networking skills. Yet if peer integration was stunted, inhibited friendships, or social rejection, the adult may procrastinate on team tasks to avoid group dynamics that feel threatening. They might defer scheduling meetings or drafting collaborative plans, using solitary fine-tuning of background research as an excuse to escape social engagement. Here, the latency stage's emphasis on peer integration becomes a procrastination trigger rather than a growth opportunity. Healthy latency and genital integration rely on the ability to sublimate earlier impulses into constructive aims. Sublimation in latency translates instinctual drives into academic curiosity. In genital, it channels libido into meaningful work and relationships. When sublimation fails, neurotic fixations resurface as procrastination traps. Tasks that threaten to expose unresolved oral, anal, or phallic conflicts are met with delay tactics. Breaking these latency and genital phase procrastination traps begins with recognizing the task elements that echo developmental wounds. If drafting drafting a group proposal stokes anxiety about peer rejection, the individual notes the parallel to childhood social fears. If finalizing a report triggers perfectionistic freeze, they recall anal retentive patterns. Naming these links reduces their unconscious power, turning diffuse dread into specific historical conflicts. Next, the individual reinvigorates healthy sublimation by reframing the task's purpose. In latency-related hesitancy, they focus on collaborative learning, viewing team meetings as opportunities for shared discovery rather than evaluative judgments. For genital stage paralysis, they reconnect with the project's broader meaning, how its completion advances collective goals or personal values, transforming work from source of anxiety into channel for mature expression of instinctual energy. Practical strategies enforce this reframing, setting small, time-bound collaborative activities, for example, a 10-minute brainstorming session, bridges the gap between solitary avoidance and group integration. Alternating these with brief solo writing sprints anchors the balance between social engagement and independent productivity. These alternating sprints mimic healthy latency flexibility, preventing the avoidance loop from taking hold. In the genital realm, pairing creative action with immediate feedback counteracts perfectionist paralysis. After drafting a section, the individual shares it informally with a supportive colleague or friend, soliciting positive input and minor corrections. This rapid prototyping approach curtails endless self-revision by embedding external validation and collaborative refinement, nourishing genital stage integration of work with relationships. Moreover, redirecting libido into preparatory rituals can ease the transition from latency's academic immersion to genital productivity. A brief, enjoyable hobby, sketching, playing an instrument, prior to tackling a challenging work task, primes the psyche for focused energy. These rituals recognize the mind's need for instinctual expression and harness it productively, rather than allowing oral or phallic fixation impulses to hijack task engagement through procrastination behaviors. Reflective journaling offers another tool, writing about the day's procrastination moments, not simply noting tasks left undone, but exploring the felt mind-body experience of delay, uncovers latency and genital stage patterns. The individual records when social fears, perfectionism, or grandiosity surfaced, linking them back to stage fixations. This reflective practice transforms unconscious patterns into conscious awareness, a critical step for Freud's work-through process. Finally, adopting a maturational mindset affirms that latency and genital capacities, once fully integrated, provide enduring sources of motivation, reminding oneself that both peer collaboration and mature productivity serve lifelong growth helps dissolve anxiety rooted in childhood conflicts. Affirmations such as, "My work builds relationships and meaning," or "I contribute value even when imperfect," strengthen the functional aspects of latency and genital stages, reinforcing healthy sublimation over procrastination. Applying Freud's stage model to procrastination reveals how adult delay behaviors mirror early developmental conflicts. By identifying tasks that resurrect latency, social fears, or genital stage perfectionist anxieties, reframing sublimation aims, implementing balanced action rituals, and reflecting on mind-body experiences, individuals can redirect psychosexual energy into constructive achievement. In doing so, they break free from procrastination traps and fulfill the mature promise of Freud's final stage. Procrastination often functions as a covert act of rebellion against internalized authority figures and their demands. Freud understood that the superego represents the internalized moral standards of parents and society, and when these standards feel overly harsh or punitive, the ego may revolt by delaying tasks. This rebellion is seldom conscious. Instead, it emerges as chronic indecision, habitual delay, or self-sabotage precisely when expectations feel most stifling. Imagine an individual facing a strict deadline imposed by a demanding supervisor, an echo of a parent who once enforced rigid rules. The superego's voice admonishes, "You must finish perfectly and on time," triggering anxiety and a fear of punitive self-judgment if the result falls short. The ego, seeking relief from this harsh internal scrutiny, postpones the work, rationalizing minor distractions as deserved breaks. Yet each delay intensifies the superego's reproach. "You're irresponsible," and the cycle deepens. This pattern reveals procrastination as disguised rebellion. The individual unconsciously resists superego authority by deferring action, expressing defiance through inaction. The more punitive the superego, the more seductive the relief of procrastination becomes. Tasks associated with parental or societal pressure, tax returns, performance reviews, difficult conversations trigger greater rebellion and thus heavier procrastination. Conversely, self-chosen or internally motivated projects rarely inspire delay, because the superego's demands feel less oppressive. Recognizing procrastination as rebellion requires noticing guilt and relief co-occurring. The moment one opts for distraction, checking email, reorganizing the desk, grabbing a snack, observe the instant relief wash in. That relief indicates release from superego tension. However, guilt often follows, awakening the superego's anger. Paying attention to this emotional sequence, anxiety, delay, relief, guilt, reveals the hidden power struggle between ego and superego. Self-sabotage further illustrates this rebellion. Consider a writer who repeatedly misses submission deadlines. Each missed deadline provokes self-criticism, but the writer still avoids the work. In Freudian terms, the superego's perfectionist ideal paralyzes the ego. To rebel against impossible standards, the ego chooses sabotage through procrastination. The writer unconsciously prefers missing deadlines to risking criticism for imperfect work. Procrastination thus becomes a defensive strike against internal tyranny. Redirecting this rebellious energy into healthier assertion begins by renegotiating superego demands. The individual composes a contract with the inner critic, stipulating realistic standards and humane deadlines. For instance, I will draft a project outline by Thursday evening and accept it may be 80% complete. This contract shifts the dialogue from all-or-nothing obedience to collaborative agreement. The superego's voice is acknowledged but tempered, reducing its capacity to drive rebellion through procrastination. Another strategy is deliberate partial compliance. Instead of aiming for total task completion, the person commits to minimal forward movement, writing a single paragraph, making one phone call, setting a 10-minute timer. This micro-action satisfies the urge to rebel by granting a sense of control, while simultaneously undercutting the superego's demand for perfection. With each small success, the superego's authority weakens, and the ego gains confidence to pursue larger steps without invoking rebellion. Reframing procrastination as communication from the superego opens space for dialogue. When delay occurs, the individual pauses and asks, "What are you rebelling against?" Noting the specific task component, its difficulty, its emotional charge, clarifies the underlying fear or resistance. Perhaps a difficult report evokes memories of harsh academic grading, or a challenging conversation recalls childhood scolding. Bringing these associations into awareness dissipates unconscious rebellion, allowing the ego to negotiate new terms for action. Group accountability can also transform rebellion into cooperation. Sharing progress with a supportive colleague or friend reframes deadlines from imposed mandates to shared commitments. In this context, procrastination feels less like defiance and more like falling short of a mutual agreement. The superego's punitive threat loses its power, replaced by a relational cue to act. This shift reduces the appeal of rebellion through delay and enhances motivation to comply. Finally, cultivating self-compassion counters the superego's harshness, reducing the ego's need to rebel. When procrastination arises, the individual practices kind self-talk. "I understand this feels difficult, and I forgive myself for hesitation." This compassionate stance decreases the superego's reproach and diminishes rebellion as a coping strategy. Over time, self-compassion becomes the ego's primary response to anxiety, bypassing rebellion and fostering sustained action. By understanding procrastination as disguised rebellion against an overbearing superego, individuals gain insight into the emotional dynamics driving delay, negotiating inner contracts, practicing micro-actions, exploring underlying resistance, engaging accountability, and cultivating self-compassion transform rebellion into constructive collaboration between ego and superego. Through these Freud-informed approaches, procrastination sheds its mask of defiance and becomes an opportunity for conscious choice and healthy achievement. Diagnosing one's procrastination style demands honest reflection on the patterns and emotional tone behind chronic delay. While everyone procrastinates occasionally, the shape of repeated avoidance nearly always hints at deeper fixations, echoing Freud's psychosexual stages. This diagnosis is less about pinning blame on childhood and more about illuminating the unconscious scripts that drive present behavior, making self-correction possible. The first clue is to trace feelings that arise in the midst of procrastination. Delays often bring secret relief, as if breaking a rule offers a private victory. This may signify rebellion against a harsh superego, one commonly found in those with anal stage fixations who internalized rigid standards very early. If, on the other hand, prolonged inaction accompanies a gnawing sense of helplessness or yearning for comfort. Oral themes may dominate. Here, delay is a substitute for care, safety, or the soothing of dependency needs that were never truly met. Note the rituals around your avoidance. Is the procrastination messy and impulsive, leaping chaotically between tasks, emails half done, and surfaces scattered with distractions? Such disarray often hints at an anal expulsive pattern. Beneath disorder lies unconscious resistance to structure, born from early clashes over autonomy and control. Conversely, meticulous organization and endless list-making paired with reluctance to finish signal the opposite, an anal retentive bent, where perfectionism quietly locks out the risk of error or exposure. Consider where and when procrastination rears its head. Tasks involving creativity and visible achievement, art, writing, sales pitches, can stoke phallic anxieties if, early in life, striving for distinction or affection from parental figures was fraught or humiliating. This type of procrastinator avoids arenas where risk and vulnerability go hand in hand, instead busying themselves with safe, low-stakes chores. If the urge to delay emerges mainly in public, peer-intensive settings, meetings, group projects, collaborations, a revisit of latency stage dynamics is warranted. Here, hesitation is rooted in past anxieties about acceptance or social standing. A useful diagnostic is to journal about specific delay episodes. For each bout of procrastination, jot down not just the facts, what you avoided, for how long, but also the exact thoughts and body sensations in the moment. Was the mind searching for comfort, bracing for imagined punishment, or mourning possible rejection? Did the body feel heavy, agitated, or numbly fatigued? Over time, a pattern of emotional and physical procrastination fingerprints emerges, revealing whether anxiety, perfectionism, defiance, or yearning for approval is at the root. Pay close attention to the internal dialogue that accompanies avoidance. Does the voice say, "It must be perfect, no one will care, just take a break, you deserve it"? Or, "What if you embarrass yourself?" Each script aligns with a distinct stage fixation, the first with anal retentive, the second with latency, the third with oral, and the last with phallic anxieties. Sometimes more than one script will vie for dominance, offering a composite picture of cross-stage entanglement. Also reflect on the role of deadlines. Does time pressure provoke a furious burst of ultimately unfinished activity, or does it immobilize you in stubborn inaction? Those who thrive on brinksmanship, pulling all-nighters and producing an adrenaline-fueled output at the 11th hour, often recreate the drama of early competitive or performance-based environments, stoking old phallic or genital anxieties. Those immobilized by deadlines, unable to start, paralyzed by the task, may be reliving childhood moments of authority and discipline, at odds with their own autonomy. Emotional aftermath is a final clue. When a delayed task is finally completed, does triumph or shame dominate? Relief followed immediately by guilt indicates rebellion against a superego that remains unsatisfied. Numbness or anticlimax, by contrast, may mark a dissociation typical of oral or latency-based avoidance, where action never quite feels like real engagement or fulfillment. By mapping these patterns, tracing feelings, rituals, contexts, inner dialogue, relationship to deadlines, and emotional consequences, individuals gain profound insight into their unique procrastination traps. Naming the dominant fixation is not a sentence, but a set of keys. Each pattern, once exposed, reveals precisely the root that can be addressed. The door then opens to strategies and practices that not only overcome delay, but also heal the developmental wounds that drive it. Redirecting energy from procrastination traps toward healthy achievement involves a conscious rechanneling of psychic forces that Freud identified as central to human motivation. In Freudian theory, the ID's impulsive drives, the superego's moral demands, and the ego's mediating function all play roles in fueling procrastination or productive action. The key to overcoming delay lies in transforming conflicted energy into purposeful momentum. First, sublimation, a defense mechanism Freud praised, channels instinctual urges into socially valued activities. Rather than suppressing oral or anal fixations by force, sublimation encourages redirecting those impulses into creative or constructive outlets. For example, oral fixations rooted in dependency or anxiety find relief in conscious rituals like regular exercise or artistic hobbies. These satisfy libidinal energy in non-destructive ways, reducing unconscious need for oral gratification that drives procrastination. Anal fixations, tied to control or perfectionism, respond to systematized creativity, organizing workspace, designing project templates, that align structure with expression, releasing rigid hold that paralyzes task completion. Next, setting clear boundaries with the superego helps reduce its punitive power that fosters rebellion-based delay. The superego thrives on all-or-nothing standards, so negotiating good enough criteria alleviates anxiety and frees the ego to act. Techniques include defining minimally acceptable outcomes and time-boxing tasks to prevent endless refinement, a hallmark of anal retentiveness. This boundary setting reduces inner conflict and makes action psychologically safer, diminishing procrastination's grip. Developing decisive momentum replaces the freeze of self-doubt or rebellious delay with forward motion. Momentum building involves breaking tasks into small, manageable steps, ensuring repeated micro-successes that bolster the ego's confidence and weaken the superego's criticism. For those with phallic anxieties, affirming competence through repeated task initiation and sharing results lessens fear of judgment and supports growing self-efficacy. Combining momentum with positive self-talk and tangible rewards increases motivation and closes the gap between intention and execution. Mindfulness also aids in redirecting energy by fostering present-moment awareness of procrastination's emotional triggers and bodily sensations. Recognizing when anxiety, guilt, or rebellion surface allows conscious engagement rather than habitual avoidance. Mindful breathing or brief pauses interrupt automatic procrastination, creating mental space to choose action aligned with mature ego functions. Regular mindfulness practice enhances self-regulation, vital for balancing conflicting psychosexual energies. Engaging social support forms another pillar of redirection. When procrastination triggers feelings of isolation or incompetence, connection with empathetic peers or mentors offers encouragement and accountability. Sharing goals, setbacks, and progress transforms delay from private struggle to collective challenge, diminishing shame and reinforcing commitment. Group participation integrates social and genital stage capacities, promoting sustainability of change. Educational or therapeutic interventions grounded in psychodynamic insight accelerate rechanneling efforts. Therapy uncovers and works through unresolved stage conflicts underlying procrastination, allowing integration of previously disowned impulses and reduction of superego harshness. Psychoeducation about psychosexual development normalizes struggles, empowering individuals to see procrastination as linked to growth rather than personal failure. Lastly, transforming legacy patterns involves radical acceptance of the self as a dynamic process. Acceptance means recognizing that fixations and delays are not defects, but developmental relics that can be understood, negotiated, and transcended. This compassionate self-view creates fertile ground for lasting change, freeing the ego to reallocate psychic energy from resistance to vibrant, continuous achievement. By combining sublimation of instinctual energy, superego boundary setting, momentum building, mindfulness, social support, therapeutic insight, and radical self-acceptance, individuals redirect procrastination-driven energy toward healthy achievement. Freud's psychosexual framework illuminates the unconscious engines of delay and guides strategic transformation. In embracing this path, procrastination no longer dominates but becomes a doorway to authentic, empowered action.